Right, nice to be here. Right, my name's Jason Fox, no bragging slide, let's get straight into it, we're about 10 minutes late. The guy behind Stack Overflow is a guy called Jeff Atwood, who on his Coding Horror blog points out that just doing your everyday job is not going to improve your skills in anything. You've got to go above and beyond. You've got to push yourself. And the way you do this in martial arts is you start doing katas, practice exercises. And this concept has been pushed onto coding. And indeed, his suggestions, or two of his suggestions are, one, write a blog like Radu, or the other one is to contribute to an open source code repository, like I've done. And the point here is that it's not just a case of doing your everyday stuff, it's doing something different. Now, if you've seen me doing these things before, I have created a series of plugins which, if you think about it, have actually been using the feature extension from everything from the start, from pre-process pre to pre-process post. Anybody? You know what that is now, hopefully, all the way through to the far end. But what I hadn't done beforehand was I hadn't really explored the way to extend the HTML plugin. But I know somebody who did. First, Kata, which is how do you inject the baseline JavaScript and CSS to, I think, if you can read it, it's really tiny for me, but you can probably read up here, 6 lines of code, wasn't it, or something like that, Roger? Can't remember. He started off with a file this long and then got it down to this and said, right, here you go, here is Bootstrap for DITA-OT. So thank you very much, everybody. No, there's a bit more than that. The thing is that what you get from that is a nice little Bootstrap thing, but it was wrong. It was wrong because it was Bootstrap 3, and it meant that I actually could do a job to start doing my first coding kata to put the correct stuff in it. So if I go back to doing this, I'm going to have to turn around and see what I'm doing here. So maybe if I can get the angles right, I can probably see what I'm doing. Where are we? I'm up here, aren't I? So where are we? Lots of plugins. Here we go. DITA-OT plugin, Bootstrap. So in this particular case, all you have to do is you look in your, is it your config? No, it's your includes, isn't it? You've got your includes file. You've got a header, and you've got a header which has got various bits like the CSS or the Bootstrap file. So it's a matter of finding, and obviously this is done by direct. Actually, that's a good idea. I'll do it this way so I can actually do other bits as well. So you can get the various elements in. That was how much work, Roger? About 10, 15 minutes? First kata done, but we now need to move on to something a little bit more advanced. So Command Tab. Go back to that one. Next thing you can do is, if you look at Bootstrap, Bootstrap is basically a collection of JavaScript around, plus some CSS which is compiled from SAS files, so that you can apply your own company look and feel. Again, I believe we had something about company look and feel, about changing the colours to your corporate font and using your corporate font. You can do precisely the same thing here. Now, in order to do this sort of thing, the one at the top is the basic Bootstrap 5 files. There's a CSS generator site, but this was where the first problem we encounter is that to try and inject CSS is actually trickier than it sounds, because we've already used the header file to put in the standard stuff. And DITA already styles, the HTML5 plugin already styles the DITA to a certain extent, which I don't really want. So in this particular, to cover this particular case, what I did is create another small plugin, which is now used as a dependency for the DITA-bootstrap, which means that you get the following. Come on, tab. Where are we? Second kata. So what we have here is your plugin has got an extension, lots of parameters in here. It's got some extension point, and the extension point is the copying over the relevant CSS into the system, which is, of course, the value of any feature extension is going to be the process, and the process is here. And you can see, depending on how you want to style your data, your output, you'll get various different things. Now, we support different ways of doing this, but basically, if I go back to here, that's not on the top, so that needs to be moved across as well. Whoops. So, right, that's one. I'll move this one across as well. What you get is something that looks like this. Now, what's happened here is that I have downloaded appropriate structural CSS, so that I've got a column on the left. I've got a header at the top. If I scroll down, you'll see that the menu, the banner at the top doesn't move. It's sticky. You can get sticky on the first sub-menu as well. Now, this means that what you need to do is not use Bootstrap for the actual overall layout. You need to just leave the Bootstrap within the actual text itself. So far we've just done the second exercise. Get back to this one again. So that's the second kata done. Right, let's start getting onto more impressive stuff. This actually looks really cool, but is actually really very simple. The use of output class by default maps on to the class attribute on HTML. So if you have a card, for example, it is structured in Bootstrap using CSS classes. Now, obviously, I could go in and put output class is card W50, output title is W5, and it looks as you would expect. Indeed, if I go back here, I can go down to all sorts of lovely components like badges. You can see a badge is just an output class badge secondary on the on a span. Most of these things obviously map direct back to DITA elements. And what you probably would need to do if you looked at the Bootstrap stuff is that usually when I've got something like a badge or a card or what have you, you need to multiply these things. I'll go for alert actually, because alert is another example. An alert doesn't just look like that if you just put output class alert. You need to put alert space alert secondary. So rather than getting you to do that throughout your data, what you need to do then is there is a standard entry point called common attributes, and I start overriding that with my own custom XML, my utility classes. So what I'm saying, we'll get it the right place. Where's it gone? There we go. Is that right, alert? Yeah. Bootstrap rolls the second one. Where have we gone? So, oops. I've lost my mouse. There it is. So, for example, if it's got BG on the output class, it will add badge in front of it. So you're minimizing the amount of work to be done by the system, and it looks really cool. And that's about 2/3 of the stuff you can do from this plugin. Let's move on to the next level. Okay, there are a series of components in Bootstrap. Effectively, each one is an exercise you can do to add in this. Not all of them are relevant. There's elements like a skeleton, which is used for putting a placeholder in whilst you're going, but a lot of them are, and things like a carousel of images is a worthwhile component you can put in. But you can see, in this case, we actually have some structure here, both to the DITA output, which is obviously structured as you would expect with images, titles, and figs. But then I need to put in inject a little bit of HTML to get these little arrows going the right direction, so that you can structure it. So now we need to start overriding our XML to get this working. And if I look at the carousel, you can see I actually have to look for either a ordered topic or an ordered list or unordered list, and then start structuring this in a div which is marked up using HTML, which is the expected fashion of a Bootstrap element. You can see here's the next and previous, and then we've got a first problem, is that obviously things like previous is a string, so you're going to have to load that in as language strings, because obviously it's only previous in English. And then you can, within that, you can have within the topic list, obviously we can use the mode carousel to only use this for the stuff which I'm doing, to actually put the various items which may or may not have a title. And eventually you end up with a situation like, go back again. Which way? That's right, isn't it? Carousel. You can see here's a nice slide, and it should automatically move, I think. Maybe if I need to, there we go. Maybe I need to go there. I can move through my slides, or you can actually, of course, put titles in it. It'll move through automatically. And more importantly, you're not polluting your data with unnecessary stuff. Every definition is going from well-defined standard data, unlike the stuff we talk about measurements later. I want to keep this really as clean as possible. None of this RNG overrides. This is pure data, which you can then extend and use as necessary. So let's move on to something a bit more. Okay, we get on to more complex controls, like off-canvas or collapse, where there is actually more than one part to the system. So here you've got a button, which is defined by the xref, which you can style as a button, you can decide as a link, whatever, and you've got the actual contents of the off-canvas. Now, obviously, if you read that, the section makes sense in that it's saying, you know, style this as off-canvas. But there needs to be some way to link that button to the other bits. So we've run out of use of output class. We're going to have to start using either props or other props, and I can never remember which one's which. So I used props. So you can see the props here has got a link to saying it's got the toggle. It's saying I'm a off-canvas toggle. So my href will link down to the section in question. This obviously needs to be dealt with the XML once again. And you can see here, you know, if I am this is saying if I am an off-canvas, and it will put your heading using the standard H1 to H6 stuff, and it needs to create an ID, because obviously that is the key for linking one Bootstrap component, the button, to the output class, which is the second one. And that is the key to the other template. And the other template here is using the same link with an awful lot of XML, then generate the HTML. Now, I had a problem with this in that it worked perfectly. And then some user said, yeah, it doesn't work with chunking. because I used to just chop the string, and I needed to chop the string based on this the generated ID rather than on the actual ID. So first bug as well. There are a lot of nice styling which you get out of the box from Bootstrap. So someone today was talking about trying to get your titles to your images below the title. That's done automatically by Bootstrap. That's the way they want to do it. Or if you want to get a nice table with, was it spanning? You can get that sort of thing direct from Bootstrap. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel here. But what you want to do is say, okay, if there's a solution in Bootstrap, how do I link that back to the standard DITA elements? And you can see here, table. Now, table is one of the problems I had with the DITA, the common CSS from DITA, in that because DITA has rules for things like row, and Bootstrap has rules for things like row, I needed to delete all the instances of row within table, because otherwise it would not process the CSS properly. There's an equivalent to frame. As you can see, there's a box around that element there, the table, and row step and col step, same sort of thing. Row step and col step on the default HTML adds a nice little black line, but there are certain special rules you need to use for tables here on Bootstrap. So looking at that sort of thing, what I need to do here is look at tables as an example. Is that I've actually got the I'm using as much of the standard table as possible, but you can see here, row processing, I need to override. So I've got the standard basic DITA table and say, well, this particular template, which already exists, I copy it and I add in my additional bits and pieces. You can see I've got things like vertical alignment or putting in the direction. Now, for frame, in this particular case, I can't make it generic, but I'm just putting a box around it. And these are hard-coded strings, unfortunately, at the moment, saying, yeah, I want a border on the top, I want a border on the bottom. Then you get this callback to common attributes, to the standard stuff, and so on and so forth. You can see here with the stuff on row set, they've got an equivalent here in the other language. For things like images, I think that's in content. You can see you can scale images just by putting an appropriate CSS class. That's obviously scale fit in the DITA world. They also have the ability to do thumbnails, which there's no real equivalent in the DITA world. So that is, as you would expect, directly saying outputclass. It's the way of doing it in the standard fashion. Now, those are your standard alerts, but obviously the equivalent of an alert is a note. You can see these notes have got the appropriate icons added in, because icons are also a part of DITA Bootstrap. And this is just a matter of injecting the additional output class. If I go back to here, I think that's in utilities, isn't it? Is it in utilities or it's topic? It could be in topic. Where possible, I've tried to keep this in alignment. I think it's topic, yeah. Where's it gone? I'd have to look for it, find out where it is. Actually, is there an alert in there? So these are, where possible, following the same, the same. It's just saying, if I'm a note, add in this. If I'm a note, add in that. Oh, it could be utility classes, actually. So, for example, Yeah, here we go. These are the icons which I'm putting in. If it's a type tip, put in a light bulb. If it's a type fast path, put in shield, and so on and so forth. Again, these are this is the way you do icons in Bootstrap. And similarly, for my notes, this is again part of the overrides which are done from the common attributes. It's saying I need to add in an alert of alert type success to make it green. So we're getting quite complex now, but there's more. There are some really rather complex components which go a combination of all the stuff you've done so far. So you can do things like, I'll show you. I've got it working. Command tab. Not that one, that one. You've got popovers here where you can click on it and it gives some text or some styled text in there. You can also do things like, there we go. We've got popovers and it's got tooltips, where on the tooltip you can have a tooltip with bits of DITA in it. You can see there's some structure here within, again, using standard DITA elements to get the things like the description, or description is going to have the word bold in there or whatever. You can do all sorts of stuff, but you need to be able to read these elements and then transform whatever's in the description to HTML in order to get the information coming through. The other bit which is within this idea is that you can have a tabbed dialog of some sort, either tabbed by pills, you can do it vertically, or you can do it using a sort of leaf type selection. And again, once again, what you want to do is do a minimal amount of structure here to have things like a title for each tab is going to be, hey, we're talking about a section. So this is trying to keep the structure as simple as possible. This is where it's trying to get a little bit more difficult. Oops. Go back here. So for the things like the tooltips, you need to inject yet more JavaScript into your page. And in order to do that, that's just in your main topic, your chapter. You have a decision, look, do I need to put this in? Do I need to put this in? And then it will just add in a file which has got the necessary JavaScript, which is here, popovers. So you can see it's a little bit of, these are opt-in elements. And then, I think it's popovers. For the popovers, you need to work out what the, yeah. So the value, I've taken the value of the contents is what's coming in, which is the tooltip itself. So we're starting to get quite complex. Obviously, depending on whether it's a left-hand popover, right-hand popover, or what have you, you put the correct attribute for what they call data placement. Obviously, it's a popover for the toggle, and for the tab dialog, again, same sort of thing here, is that depending on how I'm dealing with it, what I need to do is my template starts having these mode elements to say, only if I'm one of these, go off and do something else. And this is going to put the, make sure the first one has got the highlight, and all this time we've got to start adding in the relevant IDs so that the links are working. Okay, it's still getting more complex. Right, next one. So we've now got most of our components. This is where we can start thinking, how do we actually structure this on the navigation? Now, there are various options which are supported, but you can see that if I were to go in and look at my thing here, I make it small enough, it's responsive. It goes for mobile. Similarly, if I have it at a relatively narrow, I don't know if this one works. If I make this narrow enough, you'll find that it keeps popping in as necessary. You can see right to left languages is over 2 lines and so on and so forth, so you can actually read what's in here. Now, dealing with navigation controls is really tricky. One thing one of the components they claim to have is a breadcrumb, which apparently DITA used to have an argument for it, for a breadcrumb, which was removed. So I reinstated it here. It's the same idea as you've got for your side nav. Is you just want to go, what's the parent, what's the parent's parent? So once you've worked out what the necessary code for that is, you're fine. However, trying to deal with the navigation is tricky because you need to load in the DITA map in order to get hold of what the elements are and then work out what the title is and then work out the everything else. So there's no easy way of doing this one. For navigation, I basically copy the entire nav XSL and then add in my additional options based on that's it, based on my understanding. So there is a mode template called gen user side talk, which I've now got these various other options. I can do it like list group elements, or I can do it like that collapse navigation you can see on or whatever. Because obviously, the styling for, where are we? I'll bring this back out again. The styling you could use list group elements like that for your list of items on the side, or you could use what's called a scroll spy. Scroll spy, I've got an example coming up on the screen at the moment, so that when you scroll down based on where you are on the page, it will automatically update. Again, this is another Bootstrap component, so it's just a matter of making sure that the HTML structure is correct with the indentation being correct, to give that as an option. Personally, I prefer the collapse one because this is obviously needs to work on a more multi-depth layer, whereas for things like just plain list group, it only goes down one level. Now, there's an additional thing you can do here, if I get this here, which most decent websites do, which is if you press the tab key on a display, it should, and you go to GitHub or something like that, it will do this, offer you accessibility options so that your screen reader can go direct to the main content or go to the documentation. Once again, the wording in here has to be done using the standard language elements. So you get, I don't know, skip to main documents in Romanian or whatever. But this should get you to the right thing. So if I now skip to docs navigation and then press tab, tab, it will change the focus to there we go. Various elements and highlight them as necessary. Obviously, hidden in the HTML are the various area controls saying things like, well, if you take, for example, content components. Pagination here, there's going to be is saying that this is a navigation, saying what is this a navigation for? Where's it going to? Obviously, these links are based on. This is the reason why a pagination box is in a section. You can't read the title, but the title is required as an area control. It's not, obviously, section is not mandatory in DITA for one of these things. But if you're going to use it, you should put the controls in there. So it's getting quite tricky now, isn't it? Back to the next kata. There you go. How's your Arabic? Or it could be Hebrew, it's up to you. There are plenty of languages in the world where you don't read left to right. So this is saying ninth category, this is either in Hebrew or Arabic. This has been introduced in Bootstrap 5.2, so it wasn't in the initial version of this plugin, but there is a separate CSS to do things like getting all the links on this side rather than that side. You don't need this for everything, but obviously if you're going next, for example, the arrows should be the opposite direction. If you've got a card, it should be on this side of the page rather than on that side. But there are a lot more problems with trying to do something like Arabic into HTML, because 80-90% of the internet is left to right languages. So there is you'll notice, for example, I haven't got an example. You've got the full stop here is at this end of the line. Yeah, which is because of the way that you would read in Arabic. You'd read from the other side out this way. But the Arabs don't write their Java code right to left. They write it left to right like other people. So you need to have special processing for technical elements to say, oh, by the way, I want to override this. So that when you have things like, say this at change bar, for example, you don't want to get the at the wrong end. It needs, if you put in bidirectionality elements, it will say, oh, by the way, give it another chance to read this opposite direction. For the use of the default language is setting the structure of the whole page. In other words, the frame at the top. So there's a default language parameter, but you can put in the BIDI as well if you want to. Structure the whole page, but you might say, for example, have a document in English, which has got terms and conditions in multiple different languages, including Arabic, right? So for that one page, the main bit, the part of the page needs to be shifted over the far side. Fortunately for me, most of this particular bit is done by the guys at Bootstrap. The only thing which I needed to do was the BIDI stuff, which is, I think, in topic. So if we've set up a bidirectional document, then if I'm any of the specialized elements, either a software element or an XML element or a PR element, make sure that there is a directionality to the block. If you've already put in directionality to the block, I won't override you, but it means that I will get this going the wrong direction. So that is the majority of the plugin. As usual, what if you don't like it? What if you don't like my defaults? What if you want shadows in your cards? What if you want to make all your tables with a dark heading? What if you want to make everything in bright green? Well, you can do that. There are multiple arguments on top of the standard ones with CSS, moving what have you, add the header at the top or what have you. But you can also add in these bootstrap.css attributes to override what I've done. In that particular case, we've got within utility class, I have multiple parameters. Within how's it gone? There's it gone. Insert parameters. I've got multiple parameters which are based on if the value is set, And within the plugin, each one of those parameters is, so I want to do something, I want to change the color of my figures. I want to change the color of my figure caption. And of course, because I've got that in my utility classes, I can say, well, this is my default if you don't set it. Okay, it's getting late, folks, isn't it? This is a nice picture of Rotterdam. This is obviously what you'd really want for your system, is that you'd want to be able to support dark mode. That's coming in Bootstrap 5.3. It's not quite available yet, but this is, oops, wrong one. I want to get rid of that. This is what we've got so far. So, any questions, folks?
Thank you. So I have a question actually. It looks interesting, but as a writer, I will not put in all those specific Bootstrap classes, for instance, in my DITA topics. So did you consider maybe having a separate layer that will basically take data and will you can also match, for instance, on some sections, or generate the specific output classes, and then continue the processing to obtain the actual Bootstrap
That's
components?
that's what these will do. I'm not sure if I've got an example, but you can put your wrong one.
Maybe a configuration or something that will enhance the data content.
You could put your parameters in there as necessary. Obviously, by default, you don't need to put in any output class. But if you want to identify something as being an X, then that's fine. There are some obviously overrides. So, for example, the text at the top of the first paragraph, the short desk, is always by default is styled as a short desk. If I show that, where have I got that? Here we go. You can see that's in a different grey. If I put it back to the other one, light mode, you can see it's a pale grey for the task, and that's done automatically. In general, the vast majority of this is not marked up using additional output classes. But if you want to structure something as a card, you're going to have to structure that section as a card.
But is there a possibility to say outside, let's say, of the data content that I want like code blocks to be, like adjacent code blocks to be cards or something like that?
Not yet. That would probably be an extension because you'd need to put a card outside of it. What you can do is you could say, I want to have shadows around cards, which is what I did show. But you're saying you want to add in additional structure into the card, not yet. Open for PRs, or rather, it's Roger's plugin. Open for PRs for that sort of thing, aren't you?
So do you have any other questions? Going once? No? Okay, thank you.